Hello there, Force of Will players, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the North American Grand Prix results that occurred over this past weekend of April 16th, April 17th. Kind of go over what was in the top 16. I'll briefly show some deck lists, go over my thoughts on them, as well as overall participation and everything like that as well. This video may be a little bit lengthier. It's not going to include my tier list. What I'm actually going to be waiting for that to do an updated version of is there will be a event in Mexico at the end of the month, April 30th, as well as an event over in Europe, I believe the same weekend. So I'm going to wait for both of those to conclude, get the results from them as well, and then I'll make an updated tier list for that. Okay, so getting right on into it for today. So this is the total breakdown of the rulers that we had at the North American event. It is organized via amount of people who entered with it, so 11, 9, 5, etc., etc. It is not organized alphabetically after that. Okay, I didn't really organize all of the single decks that people brought. But anyway, what we can see, there were 86 total participants that we had registered for the event, and we can see that predominantly the most represented deck was Order Alice. So the new Alice ruler that came out in Game of Gods Reloaded gets all the regalia from older cards with Wanderer, etc., etc. Has a lot more explosive potential within the Wanderer setting, so a lot of people played it, and because it's newer, it's easier to get cards for it. Order Kaguya, I think same kind of concept. People were kind of on Order Kaguya as well. Both myself and I believe it's Seven Kings Gaming or something along those lines. We both had our own tier lists for Wander, and I had Order Alice and Order Kaguya up at the top tier. They had Kaguya at the very top tier with Alice right underneath it, pretty much. So you could probably expect a lot of those types of decks. Odin, 5 of. I had Odin really low on my list. I didn't really know how impactful his stuff would be. And he wasn't really doing what the other like predominantly powerful decks were doing. However, he did show up and was quite good in terms of like an anti-meta type strategy. Again, same kind of thing. He's also newer, so it's easier to get cards for. My last Mujdart, there were 4 of them. We will see when we look at the top 16 and stuff like that, that it was... my last Muj was very underrated. I myself underrated it. I know the European players also underrated it. It is very explosive and very powerful with what it is doing. Violet, people, I and the Seven Kings guys put, I hope I'm getting their name right, their team name right, put Violet up at our top tier. She didn't lose anything moving from New Frontiers to Wander, and all the decks that were competing in New Frontiers, Carlina, Feasting, etc., etc. at the time, were all banned. So Violet was still taking events with those rulers in the pool, and now that all those rulers and decks were gone, now you just have Violet who didn't lose anything. So we put it very high. Belial Dante, I rated in my B tier, probably like my 1.5 tier, I guess you could say. Like tier 2, something like that. They rated theirs at the top tier. I wasn't super big on the Inferno combo, but it does have very strong matchups in certain decks. I just didn't think it was fast enough against certain decks, but Belial just not allowing you to lose the game 2 or more times is a very powerful effect. Dark Tree, I think they rated this in their tier 2. I rated it in my like 1.52 area. You just don't really know with Dark Tree. It can either make games take forever. If people don't know how to play against it, they can just lose. So it really depends on like who you get paired up against. Milescrew's Ballesta, it's just a super fast deck. It can use all the Nyarlathotep cards to kind of ramp stones. And then Order Nyarlathotep, it's just new Nyar. And then you have all the 2-ofs and all the 1-ofs. So that is the total breakdown that we have. And looking at this, these are the top 16. Those are the player names. Oh, I forgot to do a colon right here. How dare I? Those are the player names. And then right underneath this, what I did was I just took every deck that was in the top and then kind of categorized it into how much of top 8 it created and how much of top 16 it was a part of. So you can see the 1st through 16th. Stephen Holshizer is the winner. Toby Gaffney and Stephen decided to split the event, but Stephen got declared the winner of the event. So Mr. Holshizer won with Mylist Mooge Draco Witch. You spam a bunch of the Nyarlathotep cards. Loki enters the Game of Gods. Cards that have chance that are 1 mana that effectively cost 0. They like give you a mana back. They draw cards, right? And then you play Magical Dragon. And then with all the stones that you're ramping, you play a Witch of the Fallen Kingdom to get a Pumpkin Witch into play, give your dragons swiftness, swing for lethal. That was how that deck functioned. Toby Gaffney was playing Odin Control, typical Odin control list. Derek Muguaneza was playing Mylist Mooge Isis combo. Mylist Mooge Isis combo was a deck he found a couple days after I had made my tier list originally for Wanderer. And we just found that because of all the mana that you get off of Mylist giving you a free mana at the start of the game, you can just kind of go into very explosive play lines and win the game on the first turn. Even through interaction sometimes, depending on what your hand is. Brendan Hill was playing Almerius Mooge Dart Control. Joseph Cuevas, Mylist Gru's Priscia chain, so it used Priscia in order to do the normal Priscia chain that we've been seeing, and then just ramp stones with Gru's Ballesta and the Phantasmal Ascendant, like Nyarlathotep cards. 6th place was Alice Order, 7th place was Kaguya Order, 8th place was Belial Dante combo, and then we have 9th Violet Kaguya Order, 10th, 11th Nyarlathotep Order, 12th Nyarlathotep Order, 13th Astema Belial Control, 14th Dark Tree Control, 15th Dante Belial combo, and 16th Dante Belial combo. So if we look at the breakdown right here, so you can see that we have 4 of top 8, so half of top 8 was some form of 6 Sage Tag Rulers. We had 2 that were Mylist Mooge, 1 that was Almerius Mooge, and 1 that was Mylist Gru's. However, of those 4 that were in the top 8, they were also the only 4 that were in top 16. So all of the tag 6 Sage Rulers that made top 16 were also part of top 8. And then you have to go into 17th place or lower in order to get that. That being said, in the grand scheme of things, the amount of 6 Sage Tag Rulers that entered were 4, 7, 9, 10, 11. 11. So there were 11 total, and 4 of them made top 8. So it's a very good conversion rate. It's almost about 50%, which is very powerful for... it's a very powerful deck if it can convert half of its entry into top 8, basically. Fallen Angel tag. So I counted Astema Belial and Dante Belial and all those into the same kind of category. Tag is very much kind of the same thing. They all play Belial as part of it as well. Fallen Angel tag, 1 made top 8, 4 made top 16. So both 6 Sage tag and Fallen Angel tag, just the tag mechanic in general, took up half of top 16 and over half of top 8. So we kind of saw this within New Frontiers as well, that with stuff like Feasting Mooge, with Carlina X, decks like that, we were having tag take up a majority of top spots, not only top 8, but top 16 as well. In addition to just entry, like how many entrants were actually on the lists themselves. So you can see that even though tag lost Feasting, it lost Carlina, right? The decks are still around because just having those 2 rulers is very, very impactful. And we can see that by it being over half of our top 8 in Wanderer, where the 2 more powerful versions of those tag rulers are already banned. We have 1 Kaguya Order in top 8 and 2 in top 16, kind of the Order control deck with the more like cancel style suite, so on and so forth, where Odin is more of the like field control deck. That was the one deck I forgot to write down here. We'll put Odin control 1 of top 8. Top 8, 1 of top 16. I knew I was missing a deck. So we had 2 in top 16, 1 in top 8, and we had 9 enter. So its conversion rate was exceedingly low, is kind of the point of that. You don't really see a very high conversion rate on that deck. Not to say it isn't good, right? 1 player still tops, 2 got top 16, but it didn't have the best conversion rate amongst everyone playing it. As we can see with like Dante Belial, we had 1 in 16th, 1 in 15th, right, for Fallen Angel tag, and then 1 at 8th. If you take a look at how many Dante Belials entered, there were 4 of them, and 3 of them top 16. That means it had a 75% conversion rate into the top 16 and a 25% conversion rate into the top 8, which is huge. It's a very large number. Moving on, we have Odin. You have 1 in top 8, 1 in top 16. There were only 5 that entered, so his conversion rate was 20%. But you could potentially see more of this like kind of anti-meta Odin strategy that people might work upon off of Mr. Gaffney's list, and then maybe iterate upon it. Maybe it becomes better for the future. Alice Order, you had 1 in top 8 and 1 in top 16, and you had 11 enter, which means it had the worst conversion rate of all the decks. Again, that's not to say Alice Order is a bad deck. It's still top 8'd. However, its conversion rate comparatively to how many people actually entered with it, to how many people topped with it, is exceedingly low. I believe it is the lowest conversion rate within our top 8 outside of decks that just didn't top 8 at all. Kaguya Order we talked about, Alice Order, Nyarlathotep Order. There were none in top 8. We actually haven't seen a Nyarlathotep player top 8 any event, I think. Any official event within the US at least. And however, they are getting fairly close, right? Like Roderick got 11th on Nyarlathotep Order, Jesse got 12th on Nyarlathotep Order. And if we take a look, you are allowed to look at this. This is our TCG Meister. This is the tournament software that we use. If we take a look down at 11th and 12th place, both Roderick and Jesse had 13 points, which was the exact same amount of points that 7th and 8th place and 9th and 10th had. So 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th were all in the same point bracket. So these two Nyarlathotep decks, if they had better tiebreakers, they could have top 8'd. There is that potential there. So Nyarlathotep is still a deck. It is still a good deck. Just because it isn't topping doesn't mean it isn't explosive. It can't do well at events. Violet, we had 0 in top 8 and then 1 of top 16. As you can see here, Violet got 9th place. There were only 4 that entered, so it did have a lower play rate. Same kind of thing with Nyarlathotep, right? Only 3 people entered on Order Nyar, and 2 of them got top 16. So the deck is, again, the decks are performing well. I spelled Nyarlathotep wrong down there. But the decks are performing well, both Nyar and Violet. They just didn't manage to make it in on this event. Again, all of them, all 4 of these people were of the same point value of 7th and 8th place. They just had worse tiebreakers. Okay? Moving on, Dark Tree, we had 0 in top 8 and 1 in top 16. That's the last kind of one. It was Mr. Dustin Jones on Dark Tree. There were only 4, so again, decent conversion rate. Dark Tree is kind of weird. I still don't know where I would ever put Dark Tree into like a tier list. I would probably keep putting it at like tier 2. It's just, again, that type of deck that if people don't know how to play against it, it's very awkward to play against. But if people do know how to play against it, then it can be very bad for the Dark Tree player, and Dark Tree can just have really bad matchups. Like, I think Dante Belial combo is one of the worst matchups ever for that deck. Kaguya is probably also pretty bad. So a lot of those like top decks that you see more people bringing, and I expect for Europe, I'll get into my predictions for Europe at the end, but Dark Tree just plays very poorly into these like more represented decks. So we'll see what happens with this. It'll probably be around. It's a weird kind of gatekeeper deck, but also at the same time it's not super powerful. So it's all sort of like Violet in that sense. But yeah. Anyway, taking a look at the top 16 lists, these are in order from 1st to 16th. This is Mr. Holsheiser's list. Again, just a bunch of cards that kind of replace themselves mana-wise, right? You have 4 Melfies, you have 4 Loki Enters the Game of Gods, you have 4 Rewriting Laws, you have 4 Sun of Manifestation of Power. This means War is technically cost 0 if it's the first card you play that game. And I'll give you 2 more cards. Phantasmal Ascendant isn't a chant, but it costs 0. So stuff like that. Right. Nothing really out of the ordinary here. Shackles to kind of stop, I guess, Violet decks as well as like Belial Dante lists. Divinum Explosion also probably for Belial Dante, and other stuff like that. Second place, Mr. Toby Gaffney with Odin. It's like Artillerist, right? So Odin has the kind of Artillerist lines that he can do. You have Artillerist, you have Mistletoe, one of the best floodgates that this game has, especially now for like the Isis combo deck and some other decks. Just being able to negate all activated effects of J-Reses in play is very strong. Yeah, it's just kind of like a Durley control deck. It almost kind of reminds me of Bogles in Modern, if anyone here is a Magic player. Sort of reminds me of that, because you like stick a Mistletoe, you make it really huge, and then you give it Drain, and then you just dome your opponent over and over again. Derek, Mr. Muwaneza, this is his Isis combo list. It's not super hard to explain what he does here. You can use Umar in order to play Phantasmal Ascendant, so it just produces an extra will off of that, and then you use 2 will in order to play Isis. You get Flames of Nyarlathotep stuff into play, red wine and breads, and then you just cycle through a whole bunch of stones. As you can see, he has 20 cards in his stone deck. You cycle through all of them, you draw a whole bunch, and then you just keep triggering Isis off of Sun of Manifestation of Power, more Phantasmal Ascendants, more red wine and bread, more Magic Stone Dance of Chaos, just all the Nyarlathotep cards with Isis itself. And then Yog-Sothoth gives your Cthulhu's swiftness, so then it itself can attack your opponent if it's buffed with red wine and bread a bunch. Same thing with your Phantasmal Ascendants that you play. And so that's just how that deck functions. Same kind of thing with like Demon of Explosions, Violet and Maria Bella for more grindy games. It lets you keep mana into other turns. Brendan Hill was on Almerius Mujdart control. I mean, it just seems pretty typical. It has the final stances, just a bunch of like good cards in it, right? Like I would just call this good stuff deck. Would really be just all I have to say about this. Oh, excuse me, I was about to sneeze. Joseph Cuevas was playing my list Gruz Ballesta. So again, you have Prisias, you have the Welsers, you have all that. But then you also have the Phantasmal Ascendant Son of Manifestations, and then Gruz Ballesta's effect allows you to keep those stones, so you are quasi-stone ramping over and over again in order to get more big shows, in order to do a big show train, and to kill your opponent, especially with like Witch of the Fallen Kingdom in order to get Pumpkin Witch. So that is how that deck functions. This is the Alice deck. Nothing out of the ordinary. It seems pretty simplistic. Kind of almost builds itself. This is not playing the what's it called? The Tales of Fantasia. This is not a Tales of Fantasia version. It's just pure Regalia. Slam it and play and get going. Kaguya. Typical Kaguya control. I was interested in the Faria and the First Boons. Curious why they decided to play that. Isis Last of the Ascendants is the Isis Resonator from back when New Valhalla was in the New Valhalla cluster. Nyarlathotep is seen in like red Kaguya decks just because it's another OTK line and it can get you more moons. However, I don't think a lot of them were playing the Isis. I don't exactly remember what the Isis does, but I do remember reading it and not being super excited about it, playing it in like a Kaguya deck. Prisias for Prisia trains, Pharesias in order to give your stuff barrier, Hanzo, like probably the best resonator in the game, specifically for Kaguya, but and then that stone lineup. Why that stone lineup? Oh, Awakening of Gruz Ballesta. Okay, yeah. Okay, that answered it. But yeah. So, interesting take on the deck. And then Rustin had Dante Belial. So I talked to Rustin. So while taking a look at this list, I want you to keep in mind that he was having issues filling out his deck by going through cards that he actually owned, because he knew what he wanted to play, but he didn't necessarily have all the cards. So if you see all these random 1-ofs, all these random 2-ofs, all that stuff, it's just him filling stuff out in the deck with cards that he actually owned. If that's any indication of how good Belial Dante just combo in general is, it's like the best thing I got for you. But yeah, so that's why all these 1-ofs are in here, and the main, and the stones, and all that. And he's playing Awakening of Gruz Ballista too for the stones, so funny. Chiron, 49 card Violet, his typical stuff. You can take a look at the list that he played right here. There's nothing really fancy or special about it. I'm pretty sure it's mostly just Violet with some random Chiron tech cards that he wanted to throw in there. Alberto was on Kaguya. This looks a lot more streamlined. He is also playing the first spoons, but he is not playing the, what's her name, Faria. And then just typical stuff. Elvish Bowman, probably for the mirror match. Teachings of the Moon gets you out more moons, I think, or it lets you draw and stack. The Violet Maria Bella is choice. But he would know more about that than I would. And then Nyarlathotep within the deck itself. Magical Arrow is probably for like the Belial Dante matchup, so you can ping your opponent. That would be my guess. And yeah. Roderick, Nyarlathotep, looks like a pretty typical Nyarlathotep list that you would see. It's just bunch of burn and hit your opponent for a bunch. And then he has a fair amount of blue like tech options on the side, right? Keys' Calls, Shackles of Ice, stuff like that. Jesse, same kind of concept, it looks like. Jesse is on Cthulhu's as well as, didn't want to go over twice, or 3 times, Jesus. He has like Isis, Malua's, Explosive Withdrawals. He's on a much more like standard list, I think, of Nyarlathotep than I believe Roderick is. Roderick seems to be on a much more like burn heavy, like aggro type deck. Oh, there's an alarm going off apparently. Give me 1 second. Interesting. I don't know why that alarm went off. I might cut that out of the video, but anyway, Jesse's deck. Emilio Balalastema, pretty standard list, I think. He had the Incarnation Nyarlathoteps from back in Grim Cluster. Nice for just hand ripping and stuff like that with the like Fallen Angel tokens you're making off of Choir and Prideful Rule and other things like that. He also played for Belial's Rule that pumps your tokens and I believe creates 1 token. So it's just kind of a way to punch in for lethal and stuff like that. And he played Angel of False Glory, which I believe is the one that causes you to lose the game on enter unless you awaken it. I'm not really sure about that, but I mean, he almost top 8'd. Dustin was on Yggdrasil. Again, this deck is just a cluster. He played 48 cards, not 60 or not 40 or anything. Nice even 48. Has Tisiphone in it, like I had in my list that I did a little bit ago, but he's only playing 1 instead of 4, and he's not playing any of the Umers. Gatekeeper, Reincarnation of the Soul. Reincarnation of the Soul is another way to stack your deck so you don't die. Is he playing Horn? He's playing 1 Horn. That's a little sus. 4 Allosaurus, that's the best one of them all. And yeah, so 4 Allosaurus, 2 Reincarnation, and then 1 Horn. Do you have more Horn in the side? He doesn't. He's actually only playing 1 Horn. Maybe he only had 1. So part of the issue with this event was people just getting the cards, which is kind of funny, but hopefully with like reprints and all that, we'll get some of that stuff soon. Travis Tran was on Dante Belial. Pretty streamlined list, I think. Black Moon Ray, Black Moon Beams. For setting the stage is kind of interesting. And then he was on a lot lower Erythropia count. I guess he has Imaginary Satan, so he has 5 color stones. Pretty standard looking list though. And then Ryan Miles, also on Dante Belial, also looking like a pretty standard list. 2 Black Moonbeam, 1 Black Moonray, 2 Intimidation. Intimidation actually seems kind of very good in this format at least. So we'll see. We'll see what happens going forward. 4 Glint, 4 Thought Control though. He was on a very heavy discard package. Yeah, 4 Thought Control, but only 1 Look. Maybe he only had 1 Look. I don't know why you would play Thought Control over Look. Actually, didn't ask him about that. But yeah, so those are all of the top 16 lists. My assumptions, so going back to this, my assumptions for the EU event. One would be, and the Mexico event. One would be if the Europeans start playing My List Mouge and they find it is also as powerful as we found it in testing, or if they find some kind of weakness that we weren't aware of by watching like the Odin control list, etc., that might prove to be very powerful for them. So we might see more uptake in 6 Sages being played for them. Belial Dante, I said it earlier, they had a very high conversion rate, and they already had it rated very high as a deck itself, so I would expect to see quite a few of them playing that list as well. EU is not really on Violet a whole lot. They typically don't play red decks generally. They're more control/combo type players, so I don't expect to see a whole lot of Violet. Could be wrong though. I don't really expect to see a whole lot of Alice, especially after how poor of a performance it had at our event. If I was trying to play into the EU event coming up, I probably wouldn't play it unless I found that it just had a very good matchup against these other decks, but I don't think it does, at least against any one of them, so I just probably wouldn't be playing that either. Odin would definitely be something to look at. If you watched the top 4 between Toby and Derek, you can kind of see that Toby just stuck a Mistletoe, prevented it from dying either due to Gradius or to just in general, and then Derek wasn't really able to play around it with Isis or anything like that because it just stopped his Isis from drawing all the cards that he needed. So you could definitely alter the My List Mouge Isis deck in order to make it playable around Mistletoe, but you can also kind of... the deck's still just very good at just Mistletoe, and then that kind of stops it, right? The other thing would be if Odin Control picks up as kind of an anti-meta type strategy, right? Like maybe they start playing Shackles or other things like that to stop Dante Belial Inferno, because Shackles doesn't really affect them, and they have Mistletoe or other things like that. I could potentially see more of an uptick in Odin Control, and then also like kind of changing the deck around, I guess, like changing the list around a bit in order to account for the decks that topped. But it does just have very good matchups. But then the 5-head like play would be with, if you expect to see more order decks, like you expect to see more Odin, you expect to see more Kaguya, you expect to see like those types of things, then Loki just inherently gets better. The only deck it wouldn't get better against would specifically be Odin with a Mistletoe. So in that event, if you expect to see more Odins, you wouldn't be bringing Loki. But if you expect to see more Kaguyas or anything like that, Loki becomes a lot stronger. But yeah. So anyway, that is the video for you. Thank you all so much for watching. Tomorrow will be the first video for spoilers that I'll be doing. I'll be releasing it after the spoilers come out for that day, so it won't be until later into the day, kind of like today's video was. But feel free to look forward to that, and then we'll have our next Wanderer Wednesday. And then after this week's spoiler video, I think the following week, right before the GP, I'm going to do a stream of the spoilers instead of an actual video, and then just upload the stream VOD. We'll see what I do with that. I'm not entirely sure. I have an idea of what I want to do for a stream, but I don't know when I want to do it. But next week would be looking pretty good for me. So anyway, again, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Feel free to leave your comments down in the comment section below, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, what you think is going to happen at the EU and Mexico events, and any other things like that. Have a good one.